So people were sitting on me. I distinctly remember one old lady like she spat on me, and I was on the floor, and and it had just gone. It was about 6 p.m. So it just started to get dark. People were filming, so I could see all the flashes of people filming me, and I'm laying on the ground, and two big Chinese guys sitting on top of me. And every time I breathe in, I breathe out a little bit less, a little bit less. And I was like, I'm getting crushed to death. Like, so I start screaming. I'm like, wabunang hushi, like I can't breathe. And they were screaming back like, no one cares if you can breathe. You're a robber. You're a robber. You robbed the phone. So then the police came, and I was so happy because the police got there so quickly, right? It's like central Beijing, Sanlitun, Beijing. So I was like, okay, cool. The police are here. You know, my Chinese is okay. I'll be able to explain to them, look, I bought the phone, and then, you know, everything will be okay. And then from the minute the police got there, everybody scattered, right? And I was in bad shape. I'd already had like my North Face jacket was all torn. I had blood all down my face, and it made it worse. I was wearing a white hoodie, right? So I had blood all over my white hoodie, and the officers were like, "What the?" They were asking people in Chinese, like, "What happened?" Like, and they were like, "Oh, nothing, nothing." So then they put me in the cop car, and I'm thinking to myself, "Okay, they're going to take me to a police station. I'm going to call some people that I know in China. I'm going to get this all settled out. I'm going to call some guys that I have guanxi with, like I have relationships with." And everything will be revealed and everybody will be fine. So I get to the police station, and the police are pushing this narrative that, like, you know how many people you hurt? Do you understand what you've done? This is not Australia. This is China. You can't just go around robbing people for mobile phones. And people started to like flow into the police station, all like holding their faces, like, oh, I got pepper sprayed by the foreigner. I got pepper sprayed by the foreigner. And at that time, I called my housemate, and I was like, I don't know where you are, but like, I'm living in a movie right now. I need you to get to the Medzadian police station in Sanlitun and help me to translate, because this has gone way past my level of Chinese, right? So she arrives, and basically the officers broke it down. They were like, you need to pay 30,000 renminbi, which at that stage was about 4,000 US dollars, to the phone vendor. And then you need to pay about 30,000 to, and they calculated, it was like, you need to pay like they said Sambai Wusha Won, which is like 3.5 million renminbi. And I was like, I mean, even on a good day on the markets, I don't really have 500,000 US dollars laying around the house, nonetheless in cash, where I can just settle this right now, right? So I was like, look, I'll make some phone calls. And they wouldn't give me my phone. They wouldn't allow me to have my phone. And they brought out one Chinese police officer, and she was like, you're in such big trouble right now. You don't understand, because you're Australian. This is China. We have, you know, robberies, about the worst crime you can do in China, blah, blah, blah. But you just have to wait here. And at that point, my ex-housemate, she just left me there. She was like, there's nothing I can do. You're going to have to wait here and go through the whole course. So I told her, like, okay, but I'll be in contact with you, because I know some people that will be able to get to a decent lawyer. So just stay by your phone. And she was like, no problem. And then I finally was taken to this little room at the back of the police station. And then they were asking me a bunch of questions, and they brought some, and this was pretty scary. They brought some major crimes guys that came, and they were in like plain clothes with like lanyards, right? They looked like narcos, or like the Beijing version of narco cops. And they were like, yeah, this is a big problem, you know, like explaining to me through the woman, through the translator, that this is like, you're in so much trouble. But first, we need to show you something. So they're flipping through this book, and they're showing me a bunch of photos of like a guy in a hoodie and like a black North Face jacket, like my North Face jacket. They're saying, do you know this apartment building? I'm like, they all look the same to me. I don't know what you're talking about. Can we start to talk about like me getting out of these handcuffs, and like, I want to speak to my lawyer? And they're like, no. Like, so they flick through a bunch of like pictures. Keep said, you know this apartment? Have you ever been to this apartment? I'm like, bro, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Like, I just want to call a lawyer. I just want to explain that it's my phone. And these two major crimes cops were like, don't worry about the phone. Like, we don't need to worry about the phone. And then they basically took a picture of some guy who looked like a Uyghur, the people from Xinjiang. And they were like, Bushita, like, that's not him. So at that point, they left, and they said to the lady, like whatever, like, we don't care. Like, he's on his own. Like, and I later found out that those major crimes guys were looking for somebody that had pepper sprayed someone, and the person had died. So word had got to them, we've got the pepper spray guy. He's a foreigner. And they came down, and they were like, we got the pepper spray murderer. And then when they realized, they're like, no, this has nothing to do with major crimes. They just left me there. And at that point, the police took my phones, everything, bundled everything up. And then I just, bam, the back of my head straight. And I was like, what the, bam, again. I got beaten so badly for that first 4 hours that my head was so swollen I couldn't think of anything. I got taken into a little room and they gave me like a drug, like a cup for peeing for a drug test that had already been opened, and it already showed like methamphetamine, ecstasy, like all of the squares had purple lines in them, and they were like, you pee in this, you pee in this, and I was like, I want to speak to my embassy, I want to speak to a lawyer. I got blood all over my face, and at no point did anybody ever ask me, so what happened today at the phone store? What happened? You just woke up and decided to go rob a phone store? Nobody asked me anything. It was already concluded that this guy's a robber. He used pepper spray. He used a taser, and he came to this like wholesome vendor and tried to kill him for an iPhone 11. And they left me there, and they beat my ass for a solid 2 days before I got transferred. And I was so happy to be leaving that police station. I was like, yes, the next place I go, I'm going to get to tell my story. Someone's going to listen to me finally, right? I get to the next place, and they've literally stripped me. They've strip searched me. And then they've given me the threadless bare, like gray pajamas you've ever seen in your life. And it was so cold. January in Beijing, it's like -12, -13 degrees. So I'm wearing these pajamas, and they've taken me downstairs on this metal staircase. I can hardly walk. I'm like trying to lean on the police officer. And he's like,
Matthew, I've got a question.
Yeah.
If you're getting beaten for 2 days,
Yeah.
how do you get through that psychologically?
I mean, I just kept thinking to myself that like somebody is gonna come and ask me that like what's happened, and so I just kept thinking to myself, the thing that was, maybe I'm stubborn, more stubborn than a regular person. I just kept pushing myself that like, don't worry, like all will be revealed, right? The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a 2-day beating, and then maybe you can file a lawsuit against the police. Or I was using a very Western.
What about dealing with the pain? Do you just get numb after so many hours?
Yeah, I think after 2 or 3 good shots in the head, you get numb, And by the time I got to the detention center, which is about 5 days after, had broken ribs. I've still got scar on my eyebrow. I was in pretty bad shape, man. And I couldn't really move for about 3 weeks.
Broken ribs is rough. I've had bruised and cracked ribs.
Yeah.
And if you sneeze, you feel like you're getting shot, and it's like hard to sleep. You can't even like move properly.
Yeah. But there was so much adrenaline for like, I would say the first, even day. I was just so angry. I was screaming like, I need to speak to somebody. I was going in waves of like anger, and then just like exhaustion and anger, but just thinking to myself like, I'm innocent. I think it's harder to accept something when you haven't done anything. If you know that you're guilty and then you get caught and someone beats the shit out of you, you're like, all right, this is what I deserve. So you take it. But when you've got this fire inside you that says like, I haven't done anything wrong, I just need my chance to say something.
So when you was limping into the new place, was the pain affecting you then?
Yeah, obviously, and it was so cold. I'll never forget throughout 2020 is the first time in my life where I've experienced cold as dangerous to your health. Like a cold. Normally you go, oh, Beijing's so cold, and I've lived in Seoul and I've lived in New York and a bunch of places that are like -20, -18, but you're not walking out there in your boxer shorts in the middle of November in Seoul, right? So the second place they took me down this staircase, and then there was just a row of like a corridor with a bunch of rooms, and there was a scoreboard at the end of on the wall. There was a scoreboard, and it had like names in Chinese and numbers. And I was looking in the rooms, and there was people that were sitting in what's later being called the tiger chair, that a lot of the people from Xinjiang have talked about. They get strapped in that chair when they're interrogated. And there was people in the tiger chair. And I was thinking to myself, holy shit, like these guys are going to kill me. I thought it was an electric chair because I was so badly concussed, and I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. I was in such a bad state. I was hysterical. I was like, these guys are literally going to just... Because throughout the whole process of them beating me, they were like, nobody cares. Like, your embassy doesn't care. You're Australian or not, doesn't matter. Like, we are the police. This is China. like, oh, well, cry for your embassy. No one cares. You don't, like, we will tell you when you can speak to your embassy. We will tell you when you can speak to your family, you know? So I had this thing flashing through my mind of like, I want to go back to the other police station where they were beating me instead of here where they're going to like electrocute me. And from there, they brought out this quite handsome, like dashing, like immigration officer that I remember. He just looked like a movie. He looked like a Korean movie star. And he was like, so, you're in big trouble. And then he like relayed it to me. And he was like, you're being charged with robbery and violently resisting arrest and a bunch of disturbing the peace or whatever. And but don't worry, we're going to take you for a medical and then we're going to deport you back to Australia. And I was like, score, like, that's much better than what the other lady was explaining at the other police station, that like I would have to pay 3.5 million renminbi and that I'm going to go to prison for 10 years. But I found out that was a complete lie. They put me in a car and drove me to the south of Beijing, which is Daxing. And I was thinking that's where the airport is, the new airport. So I'll get to go through the new airport and I'll go home.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please support our sponsor, NordVPN. As many of you know, years ago, I clicked on a link in an email. It was a phishing scam and I lost my channel. And it took weeks to get it back. But you can be fully protected from phishing by NordVPN. In fact, loads of people are asking where can they watch my Sons of Ecstasy documentary. It's not available in the UK. Let's see, United States. There we go. Connecting to the United States. So Nord is the fastest VPN on the planet. So the scammers have got good at creating fake shops online. They take your money, they are gone. But with Nord's Threat Protection Pro, you are protected. Threat Protection Pro is blocking hundreds of millions of scam hits per year. Sometimes pop-up ads containing malware are a nightmare. You're trying to close them, then boop, you go right through. Threat Protection Pro removes these dangerous files from your device. You hear about all of these huge companies getting hacked. Well, if your data is on the dark web, NordVPN's Dark Web Monitor alerts you. You can get an exclusive NordVPN deal plus 4 months extra. Link in description box on YouTube. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Link on the screen, nordvpn.com/Attwood, A-T-T-Wood. Link in description box if you're watching on YouTube. Thanks for supporting our sponsor. Back to the podcast.
And I was taken to a police station outside, and it's, you know, I was watching this fence kept flying past the side of the car, and it's you've anywhere in the world you see a prison, you see that long fence and that manicured green grass and the barbed wire, and I was like, hold on a minute, like this doesn't look like I'm going to the airport, this looks like I'm going to prison. And they took me to a police station, and they left me in the car for 7 hours, 7 good hours. I was just sitting in the car asking them like, what's going on, and they're like, shut up, like Bizway. Like, no one cares what you have to say. They took me into the police station. I signed a bunch of documents, which I later understand. I was basically signing away my right to bail and to, I was basically signing documents that say that, like, I have no job. I have no anything to tie me to China. So therefore, I need to be detained throughout the entire process of my incarceration, rather than, oh, I've got a rental lease. I own a company. I've got a registered, what they call WAFI, like a wholly owned foreign enterprise in China. So at that stage, like I've already signed away all my rights, and they're saying, just sign. It's nothing. It's for your medical. So I'm just signing, right? At that stage, I was just so happy to be out of the car and like for the beatings to stop. And I was back in the clothes that I was wearing when I got arrested. So I was like, okay, I'm quite warm. I'm quite happy, content now after the last 3 days of what I've been through. And then they were like, go over there for your medical. And that's when like these PLA soldiers came up and they grabbed me like by the scruff of my neck. And I'll never forget the floodlights shining in my eyes, right? And I'm like, I'm going to prison, man. I can't believe this. And then I was in the detention center.
So arriving there, how did that feel?
It's probably the scariest moment of your life. But it's funny, right? I look back now, I was so oblivious to what was coming. I was so like out of my depth. I kept thinking like, someone's going to come. I'm going to explain my story. I'm going to use my phone. I'm going to call the guys I worked with at the Four Seasons. I'm going to call my housemate. All will be revealed, blah, blah, blah. So I wasn't really soaking it in. And then I remember I did the induction. They took me in. They took all my clothes off me. They gave me the orange jumpsuit it's orange. It's two-tone, orange and gunmetal gray. I didn't have any shoes, didn't have any shirt. I only had one pair of underwear. They put a jacket, like a snowboarding jacket, and a pair of pants on me. And then they asked me a bunch of questions. Do you take medication? Do you have food allergies? Blah, blah, blah. Signed a bunch of paperwork, took a bunch of blood, and then put me in the room with this massive Nigerian guy who I later became friends with. His name is Remen B. And Remen B looked at me and he's like, we're in serious trouble now, man. He's like, I don't know where we are, but like we're in it right now. This is real. And I'll never forget just being so cold, Shaun. I didn't have shoes, I didn't have socks, and these cement tiles, and it was bad. And then I eventually got just thrown into a cell, and I'll never forget walking through the corridor because it was about 3 a.m. And in the detention center, you have 2 people on night duty, basically standing up for 2-hour rotations, and everybody else sleeps on the board with these dingy blankets. And it's a cement room, and it's so dingy. It's like the room hasn't been renovated since the 1950s, right? The radiator, everything is so old. There's rising damp. It's like a dungeon. There's only other way to describe it as a dungeon. And I see all these people laying on this cement, and the people standing up, and I thought it was dead bodies. Like it really looked like a morgue, and it was so cold. And the doors were like freezer, like refrigerator doors when you have like a walk-in closet in a restaurant, a walk-in fridge. So I was thinking to myself, like, maybe this is a hospital. Maybe I'm being led through the morgue into the hospital, and they're going to do a medical, and they're going to deport me. And I still just had no idea that I would end up spending 504 days in that same room.
So there's various stages of adaptation. For me, I was in shock.
Yeah.
And then I start to understand the schedule, start to talk to people, figure out who's who, and you get a routine and you adapt. Could you describe your various stages of adaptation?
So I'd been so badly beaten, they threw me in that room, and then they just gave me a blanket, and I just lay down and just like collapsed. And it wasn't until the next morning when the loudspeaker in the room, the PA just something in Chinese that I at the time was inaudible, but by the time you left, it was like that thing spoke to your soul. Like it became that PA could really it drove me crazy in many ways, the PA system throughout my whole incarceration. But then some guy just gets in my face, an American guy, I don't want to name his name, but he was there he basically had roughed up a prostitute, and then they had claimed that it was rape. And so he got in my face and was like, dude, there's a routine. You got to hustle. You got to make your blanket. You got to do this. You got to do that. And I was like, man, leave me alone. Like I'm so badly beaten. I could hardly talk. And I remember for the first 3 weeks that I was with that guy, my vocabulary was like 5 words, 10 words. I just couldn't articulate anything to him about my case or about anything. And I realize now I must have been having some severe brain trauma or swelling on the brain, because for that period, I just couldn't articulate anything across to him about my circumstances. And he had proceeded to basically nurse me, do all my chores for me, and tell me that he'd been there for 9 months. And I was like, what? Well, I was like, you've been in this room, this 2.6 meters by 5 meters with all of these guys. You've been here for 2 months? He's like, 9 months. I'm like, you've been here for 9 months? I couldn't understand. And he's like, that guy's been here for 4 years. I'm like, that guy's been here since 2017 in this room? For what? Like, where am I? Is this like, I just couldn't understand. And slowly after they started explaining to me, this is a detention center, this is arbitrary detention, you're going to be held here. Unlike in the West, right, where they arrest you after they've built the case and then they take you to trial. But in China, they arrest you, they put you in the detention center, and then they build their case. So it was explained to me that the embassy would come visit me. And the embassy came, and this was the start of what I can only explain as like the most criminally negligent embassy staff that, even compared to other G20 nations, like the Australian embassy is the worst embassy that you could ever wish for. And it started with one guy came in, and I'll never forget, his name was Stuart. And he's like, yeah, so you know, you're in big trouble and like you're being charged with robbery, but don't worry, like, you know, we come here, we'll help you to contact your family, but I won't help you because I'm going home in 2 days because I, you know, and he kept talking about how lucky he was to be going home. And then he gave me to the Chinese fixer and they literally gave me an A4 piece of paper and they said, this is the lawyer list. And you're going to use this to decide which lawyer you want. And then you'll contact us and then we'll contact your family. And at that stage, I was just like, I was trying to get my information to them, contact my housemate, contact this person. This is the 7th of January. They give me the piece of paper. 30 minutes is up. They said we'll be back next month. They dip. And the officer takes the piece of paper and throws in the bin. And I was just like, this embassy staff, they've been dealing with Australians that have been incarcerated in China since 2000, like the early 2000s. They know very well the conditions of the prison. They know very well the conditions of the detention center. They know that they cannot give you that piece of paper and you can take it to the room. But I realized early on, it's like the embassy's not there to help you. The embassy's just there to tick a box. Like, did we give him that piece of paper? So I go back to the room and I'm furious, right? And I'm speaking to David, one of the guys in the room, and he's like, "Yeah, my embassy's great. Like they visit me every month. They bring me money. Like yeah, it's amazing. They've done so much for me." And I was like, "What? Like they bring you money?" Because the embassy asked me, "Do you have money?" I was like, "No, but don't worry about it. What do I need money for?" I didn't realize you need money for everything, right? And then I went back to the room and it was just like, okay, I got to get my shit together here. Like this is getting serious. I can't spend months in this room. Like I've got a business to run. I've got family. I've got people that are relying on me to pay their salaries. So I got to get my act together. And I started like borrowing paper from somebody and writing down like key points, what I need to do. So for my next embassy visit, and that was the 7th of January. And then like they opened the door on the 14th of January and they're like, there's a virus outside killing lots of people. So yeah, there's no shopping anymore. There's no embassy visits. There's no court. There's no anything. Just wait. You guys are here. Just be patient.
All right, before we get to that section, Matthew, let me ask you a quick question then.
Yeah.
So when you were recovering from your injuries and you were very fragile,
Yeah.
how did that affect you eating, using the toilet, and sleeping?
So for the first 3 weeks, I didn't have to do anything in the room. I didn't have to sit when everyone else was sitting. I didn't have to sleep when everyone else was sleeping. I didn't have to clean the toilet. I didn't have to do anything. I was literally just allowed to just lay on the blanket because I was so badly, and I've still got one scar on my hand. My hand was like a big open wound. So the American guy.
But like you say, you laid on the blanket. What's the sleeping conditions?
So you're in, like I said, you're in a 2.6 meter by 5 meter room, very high ceilings, and in the middle of the room, say 80 centimeters is like a walkway, and then the rest of the room is like it's maybe like a 3 feet high concrete, like a hearth, right? Where like in those old houses where they put like firewood under the concrete and they sleep on top. So it's like that. That's the majority of the room, and then you've got like an all glass toilet, and it was a squat toilet. I'd never used a squat toilet before, and that's just all open. There's 2 CCTV cameras, one at each end, one in the toilet, and then there's these neon lights that are on, and then just a door, and there's no windows, there's no anything.
So there's no privacy. There's no privacy for the toilet.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story about that later. But so then I'm laying on the board, on what they call the board, right? They call it the board, right? So and throughout your whole experience in Chinese detention center, like zoba means like sit on the board. And then so they just keep talking about the board, right? So guys sit on the board all day. They basically roll up their blanket, they put it under themselves, and they sit on the board and just stare at the wall and wait for the court to come. So I was just sitting in the corner, and the American guy was feeding me. He was helping me with food. I would need 2 people to carry me to the toilet. I had this huge open wound on my hand. I was asking them for medical, and they just kept telling me like, Dangisha, like just wait, like the medical is coming, and just it never came. And then after 3 weeks, and this is a common thread in Chinese prison that I really have not been able to talk about with legacy media, is that the Chinese prison system is delegated from the Chinese police because the Chinese are super lazy, and they have just delegated all of their duties to Chinese with foreign passports. So every room has like a dedicated like number 1 in the room, and it's always a Chinese guy with a Canadian passport, British passport, Australian passport, and they're always worse than the police. They're always working in cahoots with the police. And they're always like, they'll have a dispute with one of the Nigerian guys, and then they'll scream on the microphone like, oh no, he's trying to kill me, he's trying to kill me, and the police will come and they'll put the Nigerian guy in chains, and he'll just sit there for 2 weeks. And throughout my entire prison experience, Chinese nationals, Chinese-born foreign nationals, are complicit in so many atrocities inside the Chinese prison system, and they just make everything worse for everybody. And that's something that I want to delve into a little bit later, is just the way that these Chinese with foreign passports, they make out like, oh, I'm so hardly done by to the embassy. And then they'll, like, once I've met with my embassy, they'll translate everything I said to the Australian embassy back to the police in the detention center. And then they'll talk to the embassy and say, oh, I'm being so hardly done by. And then they'll go to the room and they'll talk to the police and say, yeah, Australian embassy, so stupid. Can't believe these people, idiots, blah, 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 blah. So that guy for that.
I'm sorry, what about the eating as well?
Yeah, so that guy from the room, the number one for that room, he came to me and he was like, 3 weeks already, you're doing nothing in this room. You have to pull your weight, you know? So you got the chores, you got to clean the toilet, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I was like, who are you, man? Like, who are you? Like, who died and made you king? And he's like, you need to understand the rules of this place. I was like, the rules of what, dude? I was like, I'll murk you, bro. You're nothing. He's like 5'2". I was like, I will rip your head off. I won't even, like, I will just murder you right now. And they called the police. The police took me outside and basically gave me the rundown. They were like, look, if you have a problem with Chinese people in Chinese prison, it's going to be very hard for you. It's going to be very hard for you. The number one is there because he's the number one. If you have a problem with him, it's like having a problem with us. So better you just shut up and wait till you go to court and don't give us any troubles. Otherwise, we're going to come down on you like you wouldn't believe. And yeah, I mean, as far as the food was unedible. I mean, it was cabbage that was if you go to a market and see like the worst grade of everything, like the worst grade of potatoes, the worst grade of cabbage, the worst grade of anything you can recognize, they would just boil it to no end, and then you would just get that in a tiny tray, like a plastic tray, and like a plastic lunchbox, right? And they would just give you that, and then they would just give you like a manto, which is like a steamed bun. And you just had to eat it. And if you didn't eat it for 2 or 3 days, then that was your fault. And then you had to eventually force yourself to eat it. And one of the hardest things was that we didn't have shopping because of coronavirus, right? So like you couldn't buy soap, you couldn't buy toilet paper, you couldn't buy toothpaste, you couldn't buy anything and nothing is provided. It's not like other prisons where you ask the police, hey, we need bleach to clean the room. It's like you're responsible for everything yourself. And if you don't have money, then you don't shower with soap. And I didn't have money for 10 months. So throughout that whole process, I'm dealing with the fact that I'm like, still never got my opportunity to tell anybody what's happened. You know, I'm still waiting for my audience with somebody that has the common sense to understand I didn't rob anybody. And but before I even got to that stage, the prosecutors, they sent the investigators, and then that was when they came to me and gave me the rundown. They were like, you're formally after 37 days, I was arrested and I was formally charged with robbery, violently resisting arrest, and disturbing the public security. And I was told that you need to confess to the material facts of the case as per the Chaoyang prosecutor's office, which is the district for Beijing where I was arrested. And like torture's a big word. A lot of people throw around like, I was tortured. I felt so tortured. Like everybody in that detention center is tortured, because you get the standard torture for everybody is malnutrition, sleep deprivation, and isolation. Can't speak to your people, can't call your embassy, can't speak to your lawyer. Food is inedible. So you've got malnutrition and you sleep deprivation. You can't sleep. How can you sleep with 35 people in a 2 meter by 5 meter room with the lights on? It's impossible. But on top of that, if you don't cooperate and sign the material facts as per the prosecutor's office, then you're open to starving, being frozen, being electrocuted, being chained to the wall for 7 days at a time, being left in a room with the static on the speaker, and not being able to sleep for 8, 9, 10 days. Anything, nothing is off limits as far as the police have to get you to sign that confession. And I later understood about Chinese prison is they're not going to be like, oh, okay, so prove these are not your drugs. Well, there's no DNA on the drugs, so therefore it can't be his. It's like, no, but he confessed. His confession, it's typed up. It says here he confessed. And you're like, but why would you confess to something you wouldn't do, right? And that's what my thinking was like, all these guys, this guy obviously raped that prostitute. Why would you cop to raping a prostitute if you didn't do it? But that's because they torture you to the point that you have to confess. And the system is structured so that after 8 months of torturing me, they came to me and said, look, Matthew, if you sign this document, which is a leniency agreement, we'll give you 4 years. You will only serve 4 years. All the time that you've already served in the detention center, which is 8 months, that's included in that 4 years. Sign this document. Your life will be so much easier. And at that stage, man, I was like, I've actually seen these people can't keep you here for 6 years. I've seen these people cannot allow you to call your family for 5 years. I've seen these people torture somebody so that the guy's his brain is so scattered that even if he walks out of here tomorrow, his life is already destroyed. And I was very wary. I was like, I got to sign that piece of paper. So when I got into the process of signing the piece of paper, they said, if you don't sign this piece of paper, you will start your sentence at 6 to 10 years. And you'll probably get like the high end of that. You probably get 10 years, 12 years even, because you haven't coordinated and you've taken 8 months to sign the simple confession. But if you sign that confession and you admit, yes, I went to the phone store to rob Mr. Wei, I bought the pepper spray online, it's all me, then 4 years. And, you know, they're like, you've already served 8 months. At that point, I was like, I had no toothbrush. I hadn't spoken to my family for 300 days. I had no idea what was happening with my company, my apartment, nothing. I'd just been trapped in that room, no embassy visits, no anything. And I was so desperate. I was like, 4 years is better than 10 years, you know? So I signed, and then things started to get a little bit easier.
What about toilet paper? Did they withhold that from you as well?
Yeah, I didn't have toilet paper. I had to work for a Chinese guy that was caught smuggling ivory for him to give me toilet paper. And he had some connection with the police where his brother was still topping up his card even during coronavirus. And then the police were taking money from him and giving him the most basic necessities. So he would give me like this, it's goldfish. It's like liquid detergent that you clean your dishes with. He would give me one of those and I was using it to shower. But he couldn't get a toothbrush. He couldn't get toothpaste. And so I had to learn from some of the Muslim guys in the detention center how to use water and a squat toilet and how to just get on with it. And in all honesty, like that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, Shaun. You know, when you grow up in the West, like using toilet paper or like these things are just very fundamental. Like this goes back to when you're a toddler, like your mother trained you how to use the toilet with toilet paper. And to get to 34 years old and like some of those things were harder than the fact that you haven't spoken to your family for a year. It's like I've got no dignity in here. There's a poverty of dignity in the Chinese detention system that if you have money, you can escape, but without money, you suffer a poverty of dignity and you become somebody that you don't even recognize yourself. You know?
Was there a Chinese guy who thought he was Jesus?
It's so funny. One of the chapters in my book is the Messiah complex. And I don't know if I can name him because I don't want to go to court, but he doesn't have enough money to take me to court anyway.
Just call him Jesus. Call him Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a Christian. I'm a Baptist, so it's quite offensive, you know, to call this moron Jesus. But he had convinced himself. Yeah, JC. He had convinced himself that he was a billionaire and that he owned an airline in Thailand. And that he was married to like Thaksin Shinawat's daughter, and he had a golf course in Hua Hin, and amongst other things, he could cure anybody's ailments. And he came up to me one day, and he pulled a hair out of his head. He literally pulled a hair out of his head, and he goes, "You see this?" And he was dead serious. I was like, yeah. I see it. And he goes, you see how it's gray at the bottom and black at the top? I was like, I mean, you're holding it the wrong way, but he's dead serious. He's like, no, I'm like reversing the aging process with my massage and with my methods. And he's like, I can help you, Matthew. I can help you. You got a lot of problems, but I can help you. I was like, this guy's crazy. And the other people in the room, nobody said anything. They were like, so one of the things in the detention center, right? You fight with everybody. You fight for the simplest things. You fight for food. You fight for space. You fight for privacy. You fight for cold water. You fight for hot water. You fight for any water. You fight for everything in that detention center. And you're fighting Mongolians, Nigerians, a lot of like petty criminals, a lot of Chinese, a lot of like pickpockets, like.
Matthew, what do you mean by fight? Do you mean like compete or fist fight?
I mean, you punch on all day, every day. It's like being in a gladiator's arena, and it starts from the minute 5 a.m. when they wake you up. Someone's like, "Stop looking at my pillow." I'm not looking at your pillow. Like, you're looking at my pillow. Like, fuck your pillow. And then the guy's like, "My pillow." Bam, and it's on non-stop all day, every day. Half the room is in chains because that's the only way the police can stop you from killing each other. And if the hand chains don't work, they chain your hands to your legs. And you're just sitting there. But the Messiah was adamant that he could save everybody in the room, and that he was a billionaire, and it was wild. Like he would do this thing where he would like punch, and he would make the noise with his mouth, and he'd be like, "I'm breaking the sound barrier. I could teach you." And other people picked up pretty quickly that like if you fed into his madness, that he made the room a lot easier for you. So other people were like, "Oh, sure, can you teach me?" And he's like this. And oh man, he massaged one American guy. The American guy had back problems. He was massaging the guy with a snapped off hairbrush handle, and was like, the guy was purple all over his body, was purple from this guy. And he was doing it so he could get an extra helping of rice, because once a month they gave rice. So the Messiah would give him an extra serving of rice. And I was looking at the guy, I was like, man, you're gambling with your entire life, because you're allowing the Messiah to use a hairbrush on you. I'm like, because you're letting him believe that he's really got some gift that he can cure people with a hairbrush. It was wild. And the scariest thing is, like, that he's a British citizen, and actually later on he went to prison, and he had a lot of sway in the prison. He relayed a lot of information to the police, and if he liked you, you got away with a lot of things, and if he didn't like you, your life was hell. The Scotsman that I was in prison with, that actually like gave me the idea of talking to you, he's also British, right? So he's also using the same embassy, and the embassy was catering to the Messiah like a concierge service. And then the Scotsman could never get a hold of the embassy. They were even telling the Messiah, tell him to stop calling us so much, because we'll see him in 2 months at the next visit. But the Messiah was calling the embassy like every day to ask them to do this, do that, do this. So as crazy as it was, for the most of the time that you're in the detention center, your life is in the hands of these maniacs.
What were the Mongolians like?
Mongolians are some of the wildest people you'll ever meet in your life. And for whatever reason, they love me, though, because I'm a fighter as well, right? So I was like, I'm not afraid to throw down. Some Chinese guys abusing me, bam, headbutt straight. I'm not here to waste time and make friends. So I moved a lot of rooms as well. I moved rooms about 13 times in the 500 days that I was in the detention center. And every room had 3 or 4 Mongolians in it, and they were all super scary. But for whatever reason, they embraced me, and they were like, we like you because you don't take shit from anybody. And, having them as friends was definitely to your advantage, because they were making, it's so wild. They were making like sewing needles out of spoons, plastic spoons. And they would take like thread from clothes, and they would cut the handle, and then they would like whittle it down and make it into a sewing needle. And then they were like sewing clothes for people and doing like, and they could do anything, these guys. So having them in your corner was really helpful. But they used to fight a lot, and they would fight with each other. They would fight with Nigerians. They would fight with the Chinese. They were wild, but it kept me on my toes. And also because most of them had been in prison their entire life, they were like, don't worry, 4 years? What is 4 years? I just finished 12 years. like I'm gonna go back for another 10 years. 4 years is nothing. So it kind of kept me in good spirits, right? But
What was the worst violence that you saw, and did they make weapons?
no, it wasn't like there was no shivs and stuff like that. I saw one guy get beaten really badly. One North Korean guy got his head smashed through the glass in the detention center because he was complaining that one of the Mongolian guys was like passing gas too much, which is just like when you're eating cabbage and steamed buns all day and you're living in such close confines, like everybody's just dropping bombs all day. And then these guys started off on each other, and the Mongolian guy just smashed his head into the door, and it broke, and then he had like all sorts of cuts, and that was pretty hardcore. But other than that, most of the violence was from the police, man. Most of the violence was chaining an African guy that had had an argument with a Chinese guy, chaining them like a dog, and then taking them outside, electrocuting them, and you can hear all the screams, and then bringing them back on their all fours and getting them to apologize to each and every room, and then walking them down the corridor like a dog, and they have to come back and apologize and say, "I'm so sorry." That was pretty brutal, man, to be
How
honest.
did you feel? How did you feel when you were always watching that?
So one thing that I have a very good relationship with the Nigerian community as well in the prison system was because like I would always call bullshit. I'm like, no, man, this is wrong. Like, and I would tell the number one, I'm like, you're British, right? Like you have a British citizenship. Like you live in like in London. Like you think this is okay? This is like 15th century, man. Like what are you like? And then like you want to be friends with me because we can relate, because we both like cocktail bars and jazz music. I'm like, bro, this is like, and so I got a reputation for the Nigerians as being somebody that fought for everybody else, not just myself. Like I could have used it to my advantage, right? I could have been talking to all the Chinese guys like, yeah, don't worry about these Africans. They're stupid. You know, you and me, it's you and me together. The same way the Chinese do with the police, right? I could have used the fact that I'm a white guy and I speak English and I've lived abroad. I could have gotten real close with the Chinese, and a lot of things would have been really easy for me. But I was stuck on like what's right, you know. You started a fight with that guy, and because he's 6'2" from West Africa, now you're scared. And the 5 Chinese in the room, you guys can never fight the 4 Nigerians.